Hey guys, tonight we are talking about the lost secrets of ancient Mesopotamia. Part 1, the cradle of civilization, long before the Egyptian pyramids or the temples of Greece. There was a land between two mighty rivers where the foundations of human civilization were laid. This region, known as Mesopotamia from the Greek meaning between rivers, was home to some of the world's earliest cities, laws, writing systems, and monumental achievements. Nestled between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, Mesopotamia has been called the cradle of civilization, and for good reason. It is here that humanity made its first great leap from scattered tribes to organized urban societies. The Fertile Crescent, the landscape of Mesopotamia, was both harsh and generous. The rivers provided fertile soil through seasonal flooding, enabling early humans to shift from hunting and gathering to agriculture. Around 10,000 BCE, people began cultivating wheat, barley, and legumes in what is now called the Fertile Crescent. This revolution in food production allowed permanent settlements to flourish. The unpredictable floods of the Tigris and Euphrates required early Mesopotamians to develop irrigation systems, digging canals and dikes to control the waters. This challenge encouraged cooperation, leadership, and technological innovation, paving the way for the first organized communities. From villages to cities by 4000 BCE, farming villages had evolved into larger towns. Trade, craft specialization, and surplus food supported a growing population. One of the first known urban centers, Uruk, emerged around 3500 BCE. Uruk was home to tens of thousands of people, a staggering number for the time, and featured monumental architecture like ziggurats and defensive walls. Uruk also saw the birth of writing. The earliest known script, cuneiform, was developed by scribes using reed styluses to make wedge-shaped marks on clay tablets. Initially used for recording goods and trade, cuneiform expanded to include administrative records, literature, and even poetry, such as the famous Epic of Gilgamesh. The first kingdoms, the growth of cities, led to the rise of city-states independent political entities centered around a city and its surrounding lands. Each city-state, such as Ur, Lagash, Eridu, and Kish, had its own ruler, gods, and culture. They often competed for resources and power, leading to frequent wars and shifting alliances. The rulers of these city-states were both political leaders and representatives of the gods. Temples played a central role in city life, serving as economic hubs as well as religious centers. Priests managed vast storehouses of grain, wool, and other goods, effectively acting as the city's administrators. Religion and the gods. Mesopotamian religion was polytheistic, with hundreds of deities representing natural forces, celestial bodies, and aspects of daily life. The sky god Anu, the storm god Enlil, and the goddess of love and war Inanna were among the most important. Temples, often built atop ziggurats, were designed to bring humans closer to the gods. Religious rituals were elaborate, involving offerings, prayers, and festivals. Priests interpreted the will of the gods through omens, dreams, and celestial observations. The belief that disasters like floods or droughts were caused by divine anger reinforced the importance of pleasing the gods through devotion and order. The invention of writing, one of Mesopotamia's most enduring contributions to humanity, was the invention of writing around 3200 BCE. The earliest cuneiform tablets recorded transactions, lists of goods, laborers, or animals. Over time, writing became a tool for government, commerce, and culture. The Epic of Gilgamesh, written in cuneiform on clay tablets, is considered the world's first great literary work. It tells the story of a legendary king's quest for immortality, exploring universal themes of friendship, loss, and the search for meaning. Law and order. As cities grew, the need for rules and governance became clear. By the early 2nd millennium BCE, rulers like Hammurabi of Babylon created codified legal systems. The Code of Hammurabi, inscribed on a stone stele, set out detailed laws covering property, trade, family, and crime. Its famous principle of an eye for an eye reflected the idea of justice through reciprocity. This legal code was groundbreaking. It established the rule of law, ensuring that even powerful individuals could be held accountable to a written standard. Trade and economy. Mesopotamia's lack of natural resources like timber, metal, and stone forced its people to become skilled traders. They exchanged surplus grain and textiles for copper, tin, and luxury goods from distant lands like Anatolia. The Indus Valley and Egypt. The rivers served as trade highways, while early wheeled carts expanded overland transport. Silver and barley were often used as forms of currency, and contracts were recorded on clay tablets, complete with seals and signatures. This economic network helped knit the ancient world together, setting the stage for globalization thousands of years later. Science and technology. Mesopotamians were not only skilled farmers and builders, but also pioneers of science. They developed mathematics based on a base st system, which we still use for measuring time. Astronomy, charting the movements of stars and planets for both agricultural and religious purposes. Calendars, crucial for predicting the flooding of rivers and planning harvests. Their innovations in engineering, from irrigation to the invention of the wheel, laid the groundwork for future civilizations. The mystery of origins. Despite all we know, Mesopotamia still holds many mysteries. How exactly did small villages transition so quickly into massive urban centers? Some historians suggest that environmental pressures, like unpredictable floods, pushed communities to cooperate and innovate. Others believe that early trade networks encouraged rapid development. Archaeological evidence continues to emerge, with new discoveries reshaping our understanding of these early pioneers. Legacy of the cradle. By the end of the 4th millennium BCE, Mesopotamia had already achieved milestones that would define civilization for millennia: writing, cities, laws, trade, and organized religion. But its story was only just beginning. Over the next 3,000 years, empires would rise and fall in this land, each leaving its mark on history. Part 2. The Sumerians, masters of the first civilization. If Mesopotamia was the cradle of civilization, then the Sumerians were the first to shape that cradle. By around 3500 BCE, the Sumerians had established a series of thriving city-states in southern Mesopotamia, creating what is widely considered the world's first civilization. Their innovations, ranging from writing and law to irrigation and mathematics, laid the foundation for all future cultures in the region. The birth of Sumer. The origins of the Sumerians remain mysterious. Some scholars argue that they were indigenous to southern Mesopotamia, while others suggest they migrated from regions to the east or southeast. Regardless of their origin, by 4000 BCE, they had settled along the banks of the Euphrates and Tigris rivers, transforming the marshy plains into an agricultural powerhouse. The Sumerians were among the first to harness irrigation on a large scale. They dug networks of canals to distribute river water to farmlands, turning arid land into fertile fields. This reliable food supply supported population growth, leading to the rise of large cities like Ur, Uruk, Eridu, Lagash, and Kish. The city-states of Sumerian society was organized into independent city-states, each ruled by a Lugal, a king who acted as both military leader and representative of the gods. These cities were surrounded by walls for protection and dominated by a ziggurat, a massive stepped pyramid that served as the center of religious and civic life. The city of Uruk, often considered the world's first true city, was especially impressive. With a population estimated at over 40,000 people at its peak, Uruk featured monumental architecture, advanced infrastructure, and a complex administration. Religion and the gods of Sumer religion was the lifeblood of Sumerian culture. They believed that gods controlled every aspect of nature and human life, from the fertility of crops to the flow of rivers. Each city-state had a patron deity: Anu, the sky god; Enlil, the god of air and storms; Inanna, the goddess of love, fertility, and war; Enki, the god of wisdom and fresh water. The invention of writing, the Sumerians' greatest contribution to history, is undoubtedly writing. Around 3200 BCE, they developed cuneiform, a script composed of wedge-shaped impressions on clay tablets. At first, cuneiform was used for accounting and trade records, but over time, it evolved to record laws, treaties, myths, and literature. The Sumerians also invented the practice of archiving. Entire libraries of clay tablets have been unearthed, containing everything from administrative records to hymns and proverbs. The Epic of Gilgamesh, written in Sumerian and Akkadian, is one of humanity's earliest and greatest works of literature. It tells the tale of Gilgamesh, the semi-divine king of Uruk, and his quest for immortality. The epic explores profound themes of friendship, mortality, and the search for meaning, and even includes a story of a great flood, strikingly similar to the biblical tale of Noah. His literary masterpiece provides a window into Sumerian beliefs, values, and their understanding of the human condition. Science, math, and innovation. The Sumerians were remarkably innovative. They created the sexagesimal system, which we still use for time and angles. They developed early geometry, crucial for dividing land and constructing buildings. Their astronomy allowed them to create calendars and predict seasonal changes. They were also skilled engineers, credited with inventing the wheel, which revolutionized transport and pottery production. Law and governance, though Hammurabi's code is more famous, the Sumerians had some of the earliest written laws. City-states maintained legal systems that governed trade, property, and family disputes. Rulers often claimed divine authority to enforce these laws, strengthening their control. The Sumerian king was seen not as a god, but as the chosen servant of the gods, tasked with ensuring justice and prosperity. Economy and trade. The economy of Sumer revolved around agriculture and trade. Surplus grain was stored in temple granaries and redistributed as rations to workers. The Sumerians traded extensively with neighboring regions, importing timber from Lebanon, metals from Anatolia, and luxury goods from the Indus Valley. They developed early forms of credit and contracts, recorded on clay tablets and sealed with cylinder seals, small carved stones that acted like personal signatures. Art and culture. Sumerian art reflected both religious devotion and a keen appreciation for craftsmanship. Intricately carved statues, cylinder seals, and jewelry made from gold, lapis lazuli, and carnelian have been discovered. These artifacts demonstrate both the wealth of Sumerian society and its connections to far-off trade networks. Music also played an important role. Archaeologists have found ancient lyres and harps, suggesting a rich musical tradition used in both worship and entertainment. The fall of Sumer. Despite their achievements, the Sumerian city-states were often in conflict with one another. This internal rivalry left them vulnerable to invasions. Around 2334 BC, Isardan of Akkad, a Semitic ruler from the north, conquered the Sumerians and established the Akkadian Empire, the world's first true empire. While the Sumerians lost political control, their culture and language lived on. The Akkadians adopted cuneiform writing, Sumerian mythology, and many of their scientific innovations, ensuring that Sumer's legacy would endure. Legacy of the Sumerians. The Sumerians gave humanity its first cities, its first writing system, and its first legal codes. Their stories, gods, and ideas continued to shape the civilizations that followed, from Babylon to Assyria and beyond. The story of Sumer is not just the story of an ancient people, it is the story of civilization's dawn, when humanity took its first bold steps toward building the complex societies we know today. Part 3. The Rise of the Akkadian Empire and Sargon the Great. The Sumerian city-states have laid the foundation for civilization, but their constant rivalries and wars made them vulnerable. Out of this political turmoil emerged the Akkadian Empire, the first unified empire in history, founded by one of the most legendary figures of the ancient world, Sargon of Akkad. Who were the Akkadians? The Akkadians were a Semitic-speaking people who lived in northern Mesopotamia, above the Sumerian heartland. While the Sumerians spoke a language unrelated to any modern tongue, Akkadian was closer to later Semitic languages like Hebrew, Aramaic, and Arabic. By the mid-3rd millennium BCE, the Akkadians had begun to adopt many elements of Sumerian culture, writing, religion, and art, while maintaining their distinct language and identity. Over time, they became both allies and rivals of the Sumerian city-states. The legend of Sargon's rise to power is the stuff of legend. According to later Akkadian texts, Sargon was born the illegitimate son of a priestess and abandoned in a reed basket on the Euphrates River, an origin story that parallels the biblical tale of Moses. Rescued and raised by a gardener, Sargon rose from humble beginnings to become a cupbearer for the king of Kish. Through cunning, ambition, and military skill, Sargon seized power around 2334 BCE, overthrowing the ruler of Kish and launching campaigns against the other Sumerian city-states. Within a few years, he had united all of southern Mesopotamia under his rule, a feat never before accomplished. The first empire Sargon established his capital at Akkad, a city whose exact location remains unknown but is believed to have been near modern Baghdad. From there, he expanded his influence far beyond Sumer. He conquered Elam to the east. He campaigned westward toward the Levant and the Mediterranean coast. His influence extended north into the Anatolian highlands. For the first time in history, a single ruler controlled a multi-ethnic empire, encompassing a vast territory with diverse peoples and cultures. Government and administration. To govern his empire, Sargon implemented a centralized administration. He appointed Akkadian governors over the conquered city-states, ensuring loyalty by placing them under strict military oversight. Local rulers were allowed to remain in some areas, but they paid tribute and recognized Sargon's supremacy. The Akkadians were skilled bureaucrats. They continued using cuneiform writing, adapting the Sumerian script to their own language. Administrative records, trade agreements, and even diplomatic correspondence were recorded on clay tablets. Akkadian art and culture. The Akkadian period saw a remarkable fusion of Sumerian and Semitic cultures. Art became more naturalistic and expressive, moving beyond the rigid forms of earlier Sumerian sculpture. The famous bronze head of an Akkadian king is a masterpiece of early portraiture. Religion remained polytheistic, but Akkadian rulers began to elevate their own status to near-divine levels. Sargon claimed that the goddess Ishtar had personally chosen him to rule, lending a divine mandate to his power. Trade and wealth under Sargon, trade flourished on an unprecedented scale. The Akkadian Empire controlled the vital trade routes linking Mesopotamia with the Persian Gulf and Oman. The Indus Valley Civilization. Anatolia, rich in metals like copper and silver. This vast network brought immense wealth to Akkad, funding monumental building projects and military campaigns. The rule of Naram-Sin after Sargon's death. His grandson Naram-Sin became one of the most powerful rulers of the Akkadian dynasty. Naram-Sin declared himself the king of the four quarters of the earth, and went so far as to deify himself during his lifetime, a bold departure from earlier traditions. The Victor Stele of Naram-Sin, a famous stone monument, depicts him leading his army up a mountain, trampling his enemies beneath his feet. He is shown larger than life, wearing a horned crown, a symbol usually reserved for the gods. This image exemplifies the growing power and ambition of Akkadian rulers. The decline of the Akkadian Empire. Despite its strength, The Akkadian Empire was relatively short-lived, lasting only about 2 centuries. A combination of factors contributed to its downfall: internal rebellions among the Sumerian city-states, resentful of Akkadian dominance; economic strain from maintaining a large standing army and vast administrative network; environmental challenges. Evidence suggests a prolonged drought around 2200 BCE, which may have devastated agriculture and caused famine; invasions by nomadic groups such as the Gutians, who swept down from the Zagros Mountains and weakened the empire. By 2154 BCE, the Akkadian Empire had collapsed, plunging Mesopotamia into a period of chaos and fragmentation. Legacy of the Akkadians. Though their empire fell, the Akkadians left a lasting mark on history. They spread cuneiform writing and standardized administrative practices across Mesopotamia. Their language, Akkadian, remained the dominant tongue of the region for over 1,000 years, eventually evolving into dialects like Babylonian and Assyrian. The idea of a centralized, multi-ethnic empire would inspire later states, from Babylon to Persia. The Akkadians also preserved and adapted Sumerian myths and literature, ensuring that the cultural achievements of Sumer continued to influence future civilizations. The Gutian interlude. After the fall of Akkad, the Gutians, a little-known mountain people, ruled parts of Mesopotamia for several decades. Their reign, however, is described in Sumerian texts as chaotic and destructive. Agricultural output declined, and many cities fell into disrepair. This dark period did not last long. By the 21st century BCE, a new power rose to restore order and revive Sumerian culture: the Third Dynasty of Ur, also known as the Ur III period. A new dawn, the rise of Ur III, marked a renaissance in Sumerian civilization, blending the legacy of both Sumer and Akkad. This era saw the codification of laws, the expansion of trade, and a flourishing of literature and art. Part 4. The Sumerian Revival. The Third Dynasty of Ur. After the collapse of the Akkadian Empire, Mesopotamia entered a period of turmoil. The Gutians, mountain tribes from the Zagros region, briefly dominated the area, but their rule was seen as chaotic and destructive. The cities of Sumer languished, irrigation canals fell into disrepair, and trade networks fractured. However, this dark interlude gave way to a remarkable Sumerian revival under the Third Dynasty of Ur, also known as Ur III. This period, which began around 2112 BCE, represented a golden age of Sumerian culture, administration, and monumental building. The kings of Ur III restored stability, revived trade, and built some of the most impressive ziggurats in Mesopotamian history. The founder, Ur-Nammu. The dynasty was founded by Ur-Nammu, a ruler who seized control of Ur and gradually united much of southern Mesopotamia under his leadership. Ur-Nammu was not only a skilled military leader, but also a visionary statesman. His reign is remembered for several key achievements: restoration of irrigation. Ur-Nammu rebuilt the critical network of canals and dikes, which revived agriculture and boosted economic productivity. Ziggurat of Ur. He commissioned the construction of the Great Ziggurat of Ur, a massive step pyramid dedicated to the moon god Nonna. Codified law. Ur-Nammu is credited with creating the earliest known law code, predating Hammurabi by centuries. His laws focused on justice, property rights, and standardized punishments, reflecting an advanced legal system. Shulgi and the height of Ur III, Ur-Nammu's son. Shulgi transformed the Third Dynasty of Ur into a true empire. Shulgi was a dynamic ruler, part warrior, part scholar, and part administrator. He expanded Ur's control over neighboring regions and fortified trade routes as far as Elam, Assyria, and the Persian Gulf. Shulgi's reign is notable for administrative reforms. He created a bureaucratic state, dividing his realm into provinces overseen by governors. These officials collected taxes, managed labor, and maintained records on clay tablets. Royal propaganda. Shulgi portrayed himself as a divinely chosen king, commissioning hymns that praised his wisdom and strength. He even claimed divine status during his lifetime, echoing the Akkadian tradition of Narmsin. Infrastructure. He improved roads and built way stations for travelers, a sign of the growing importance of trade and communication. Society and economy under Year 3. The Year 3 period saw an unprecedented level of state control and organization. The central government managed agriculture, controlled land distribution, and maintained massive granaries. Workers were often employed in large-scale projects like canal construction, temple maintenance, and ziggurat building. Economic records from this time reveal a sophisticated system of taxation and rationing. Barley, wool, and silver were commonly used as forms of currency, and scribes kept meticulous accounts of every transaction. Trade once again flourished, connecting Mesopotamia with distant lands, timber and metals from Anatolia, luxury goods and semi-precious stones from the Indus Valley, copper and pearls from the Persian Gulf. Art, literature, and education Year 3 was not only a time of political power, but also a cultural renaissance. Temples and ziggurats were adorned with intricate carvings and statues, while cylinder seals from this period show an extraordinary level of craftsmanship. Literature thrived, with scribes copying and composing hymns, myths, and epics. The Sumerian king list, a text listing the rulers of Mesopotamia, was compiled during this era, reflecting a deep sense of history and identity. Education was highly valued, especially for scribes. Schools known as Bedabas trained young men in writing, mathematics, and law. Clay tablets from these schools survive to this day, offering a glimpse into the rigorous training of Mesopotamian scholars. Religion and ziggurats, the third dynasty of Ur, placed great emphasis on religion, viewing the king as the chosen intermediary between the gods and humanity. Temples were the economic and spiritual centers of each city. The ziggurat of Ur, built under Ur-Nammu and expanded by Shulgi, was one of the largest and most impressive religious structures of the ancient world. Rising in a series of terraces, it symbolized a sacred mountain, a place where the gods and humans could meet. Priests performed daily rituals, offered sacrifices, and observed celestial movements, continuing the Mesopotamian tradition of astronomy and divination. The decline of Ur 3. Despite its power and achievements, the third dynasty of Ur was not destined to last. A series of challenges weakened the empire: military pressure, nomadic groups like the Amorites from the west and the Elamites from the east began raiding Mesopotamian cities. Economic strain, maintaining large armies and public works projects, placed a heavy burden on the economy. Internal revolts. Provinces and city-states began asserting independence, straining the centralized administration. By 2004 BCE, the Elamites sacked Ur, bringing an end to the Ur 3 dynasty. Legacy of Ur 3. Although the political power of Ur collapsed, the cultural and administrative achievements of this period had a lasting influence. The Ur 3 bureaucratic model inspired later Mesopotamian empires like Babylon and Assyria. Sumerian literature and myths were preserved and translated into Akkadian. Monumental architecture, particularly the ziggurat, continued to dominate Mesopotamian cityscapes. The fall of Ur 3 marked the end of Sumerian political dominance, but their culture lived on, absorbed and expanded by new powers. The dawn of Babylon in the centuries following Ur III's fall, Mesopotamia fragmented into smaller states. Among these emerging powers, one city, Babylon, would rise to prominence. It would become the cultural and political heart of Mesopotamia for centuries, ushering in a new era of law, science, and empire. Part 5. The Rise of Babylon in the Age of Hammurabi, when the third dynasty of Ur fell around 2004 BCE. Mesopotamia entered a tumultuous period marked by the rise of regional powers, invasions, and shifting alliances. Amid this chaos, a relatively small and obscure city in central Mesopotamia began its ascent to greatness, Babylon. By the 18th century BCE, under the leadership of King Hammurabi, Babylon would become the dominant power of Mesopotamia, renowned for its law, architecture, and cultural achievements. The origins of Babylon was initially a modest town along the Euphrates River. It came under the control of the Amorites, a Semitic people who migrated into Mesopotamia from the west. The Amorites settled in various city-states and eventually gained political influence across the region. By the early 19th century BCE, Babylon was ruled by Amorite kings, but it was Hammurabi who transformed the city into the center of a powerful kingdom. Hammurabi, the lawgiver Hammurabi, is one of the most famous rulers of the ancient world. His reign was marked by both military conquests and legal reforms. Through a combination of diplomacy and warfare, Hammurabi expanded Babylon's control over most of Mesopotamia, uniting it into a single political entity. However, Hammurabi's enduring legacy lies in his code of laws, known as the Code of Hammurabi. Carved into a black basalt stele, this code contains nearly 300 laws, covering topics such as trade, property rights, marriage, theft, and punishment. The Code of Hammurabi is often summarized by its principle of lex talionis, the law of retaliation, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. However, the code was far more complex than simple revenge-based justice. It established a clear legal framework that differentiated punishments based on social class. Some examples include, if a builder constructed a house that collapsed and killed its owner, the builder could be put to death. If a man put out the eye of another man of equal status, his own eye would be put out. Merchants, farmers, and families were all protected under the code, with regulations on trade, land leases, and inheritance. The code not only reflects the values and social structure of Mesopotamian society, but also represents one of the earliest examples of a written legal system, a revolutionary step toward governance by law rather than by whim. Babylonian society and economy under Hammurabi, Babylon became a bustling center of commerce and administration. The economy relied on agriculture, trade, and craft production. Farmers cultivated barley, wheat, dates, and vegetables, while artisans produced textiles, pottery, and metal goods. Babylon was also a hub for long-distance trade, exchanging goods with Elam, Anatolia, and the Indus Valley. Silver and barley served as common units of currency, while contracts recorded on clay tablets ensured that business transactions were legally binding. Religion and temples. Babylonian religion was deeply intertwined with politics. The city's patron deity was Marduk, who rose to prominence during Hammurabi's reign. Marduk was associated with creation, order, and kingship, and his temple, the Esagila, became one of the most important religious centers in Mesopotamia. Hammurabi portrayed himself as a chosen servant of Marduk, using religion to legitimize his authority. The construction and renovation of temples were major royal undertakings, reinforcing the king's divine connection. Babylonian achievements. The Amorite period of Babylon is known for its advances in science, mathematics, and astronomy. Babylonian scholars inherited the Sumerian system of mathematics, including the base 60 system, and applied it to create more precise methods for measuring time and space. Astronomy became increasingly sophisticated, with Babylonian priests recording the movements of planets and stars to develop early calendars. These observations were often tied to omens and religious interpretations, but they also laid the groundwork for future scientific discoveries. Hammurabi's diplomacy and conquests. Hammurabi was not just a lawgiver, but also a skilled strategist. Early in his reign, He formed alliances with neighboring powers such as Larsa and Murray. Once his position was secure, he turned against his former allies, conquering them and extending Babylon's control across southern and northern Mesopotamia. By the end of his reign, Hammurabi's empire stretched from the Persian Gulf in the south to the edges of Assyria in the north. Babylon had become the undisputed political and cultural center of Mesopotamia. The decline after Hammurabi. Despite Hammurabi's successes, his empire was not built to last. After his death in 1750 BCE, his successors struggled to maintain control over the vast territory. Internal rebellions and invasions by the Hittites and Kassites weakened Babylon's power. By the 16th century BCE, Babylon was sacked by the Hittite king Mursili I, marking the end of the Old Babylonian period. Control of the region eventually fell to the Kassites, who ruled Babylon for several centuries. The legacy of Hammurabi's influence far outlived his empire. His legal code set a precedent for codified laws throughout history, inspiring later civilizations in the Near East and beyond. Babylon itself would rise again in later centuries, reaching new heights under kings like Nebuchadnezzar II. But Hammurabi's era marked the city's first golden age. The next era, Kassites and Assyria following the Amorite dynasty, Mesopotamia saw the rise of new powers. The Kassites, a people from the Zagros Mountains, ruled Babylon for nearly 400 years, bringing stability but few monumental achievements. Meanwhile, in northern Mesopotamia, the Assyrians began building a militaristic state that would one day dominate the region. Part 6, Kassites, Assyria. In the struggle for power after the death of Hammurabi and the collapse of the Old Babylonian dynasty, Mesopotamia entered a period of political fragmentation and foreign domination. The once mighty Babylon fell under the influence of new powers, while the northern regions saw the gradual rise of a formidable military state, Assyria. This era, spanning roughly 1600 to 1200 BCE, was one of transition and resilience, with Mesopotamian culture continuing to evolve despite political instability. The Kassites, guardians of Babylon. The Kassites were a tribal people from the Zagros Mountains in modern-day Iran. By the 16th century BCE, they took control of Babylon following its sack by the Hittites. Although the Kassites were not originally from Mesopotamia, they adopted many aspects of Babylonian culture, ensuring the survival of its traditions. The Kassite dynasty lasted for nearly 400 years, the longest reign of any dynasty in Babylonian history. Their rule is notable for stability. The Kassites managed to maintain relative peace and order, allowing Babylon to recover from earlier invasions. Agricultural development. They invested in irrigation projects, strengthening the agricultural base of the economy. Cultural preservation. They embraced Mesopotamian religion, worshipping the Babylonian gods, particularly Marduk, and maintaining cuneiform writing. However, the Kassites did not build monumental cities or engage in large-scale military conquests. Their legacy lies in their role as caretakers of Babylonian civilization. International relations and diplomacy during the Kassite period. Mesopotamia became part of a larger international system of powerful states, including Egypt, the Hittite Empire, and the Mitanni Kingdom in northern Mesopotamia and Syria. Evidence of this diplomatic network comes from the Amarna letters, a collection of clay tablets found in Egypt. These letters reveal correspondence between the kings of Babylon, Assyria, and other powers, discussing trade, alliances, and even royal marriages. Babylon was regarded as a cultural and religious center, and its rulers were respected for their wisdom and wealth. The rise of Assyria. While Babylon remained relatively peaceful under Kassite rule, Assyria was rapidly growing into a militaristic state. Located in northern Mesopotamia, with its early capitals at Ashur and Nineveh, Assyria began as a trading kingdom. Over time, however, it evolved into a military powerhouse. By the 14th century BCE, Assyria challenged both the Kassites and the Mitanni for dominance. Under kings like Ashur-uballit I, Assyria expanded its territory and became a significant force in the international arena. Assyrian military power, the Assyrians were known for their highly organized army, which used advanced tactics and siege equipment. They mastered the use of iron weapons, giving them an edge over neighboring states. Their armies were feared for their discipline and brutality, often deporting conquered populations to weaken resistance. This militaristic approach set the stage for Assyria's future as one of the most dominant empires of the ancient Near East. Cultural and scientific achievements. Despite their focus on warfare, the Assyrians valued Mesopotamian culture. They adopted Babylonian writing, religion, and administrative practices. Temples dedicated to gods like Ashur and Ishtar were central to their cities. During this period, Mesopotamian scholars continued to excel in astronomy, mathematics, and medicine. Tablets from Assyria and Babylon show advanced knowledge of planetary movements, eclipses, and star charts. Astrology played a major role in political decisions, with kings often consulting priests for divine guidance before military campaigns. The decline of the Kassites by the 12th century BCE. The Kassite dynasty faced growing challenges, invasions from the Elamites, a powerful kingdom to the east, pressure from Assyria, which sought to expand its influence over Babylon, the arrival of nomadic tribes like the Arameans, who disrupted trade and attacked cities. In 1155 BCE, the Elamites invaded and sacked Babylon, ending Kassite rule. This event ushered in the turbulent period known as the Late Bronze Age collapse, during which many ancient civilizations in the Near East faced economic and political crises. Babylon's resilience, even after being sacked, Babylon remained a vital center of religion and culture. Its temples, particularly the Sigilla of Marduk, continued to attract pilgrims and scholars. Babylonian priests preserved ancient texts, ensuring that the intellectual achievements of earlier periods were not lost. The city would eventually rebound under new dynasties, including the Chaldeans and later the Neo-Babylonian Empire. The Middle Assyrian Kingdom, as Babylon struggled, Assyria seized the opportunity to assert dominance. The Middle Assyrian Kingdom saw the rise of rulers like Tiglath-Pileser I, who expanded Assyria's territory from the Zagros Mountains to the Mediterranean coast. Tiglath-Pileser I left inscriptions boasting of his conquests and hunting achievements, portraying himself as a warrior king favored by the gods. His reign marked the transition of Assyria into a fully imperial state, laying the groundwork for its later expansion. Art and architecture of the period Assyrian art of this time reflected both power and religious devotion. Palaces were decorated with stone reliefs depicting battles, hunting scenes, and religious ceremonies. Monumental gates and walls emphasized the strength of Assyrian kings. In Babylon, Kassite rulers contributed to architecture by restoring older temples and buildings. Kuduru, elaborate carved stones used to record land grants and royal decrees. The seeds of future empires by 1000 BCE. Mesopotamia was a landscape of competing powers: Assyria, Babylon, Elam, and various tribal groups. While this era lacked the monumental building projects of earlier times, it was a period of transition, during which military tactics, administrative practices, and cultural traditions evolved. The stage was now set for the Neo-Assyrian Empire, which would rise in the coming centuries to dominate the ancient Near East with unmatched power. Part 7. The Rise of the Neo-Assyrian Empire by 900 BCE. Mesopotamia was entering a new era of imperial power. The Neo-Assyrian Empire emerged as the dominant force in the ancient Near East, combining unmatched military strength, sophisticated administration, and cultural patronage. This was the age when Assyria transformed from a regional kingdom into a vast empire spanning from Egypt to Persia, making it one of the most formidable states in ancient history. The rebirth of Assyria after centuries of decline following the Middle Assyrian period. Assyria reasserted itself under the leadership of Ashurnasirpal II. He moved the Assyrian capital to Kohu and launched aggressive military campaigns to secure resources and expand territory. Ashurnasirpal II's conquests were brutal but effective. His inscriptions proudly describe the mass deportations of rebellious populations and the destruction of enemy cities tactics designed to strike fear and ensure submission. Yet Assyria was not just a military machine. The empire's expansion brought wealth, enabling monumental building projects and the creation of a centralized administrative system that maintained control over diverse peoples. The Assyrian military machine, the Neo-Assyrian army, was a revolutionary force for its time. It was the first in history to be fully professional, with soldiers trained year-round. Innovations included iron weaponry, stronger and more durable than bronze, advanced siege technology, including battering rams, siege towers, and sappers who undermined city walls, chariots and cavalry, which gave them mobility and speed on the battlefield. Assyrian kings often led campaigns personally, projecting an image of divine authority and invincibility. The reign of Tiglath-Pileser III, the empire reached a new level of power under Tiglath-Pileser III. He reformed the military and administrative systems, creating smaller provinces governed by officials loyal to the king. These reforms made it harder for local rulers to rebel. Tiglath-Pileser III expanded Assyria's borders through campaigns in Syria and the Levant, subduing the kingdoms of Israel and Aram, Babylonia, where he installed puppet rulers to secure southern Mesopotamia, the eastern frontiers, pushing into the Zagros Mountains and beyond. Sargon II and the founding of Dur-Sharrukin following Tiglath-Pileser III. Sargon II continued the tradition of conquest. He is best known for founding a new capital, Dur-Sharrukin, a city built to showcase Assyrian power. The city featured massive walls, colossal Lamazur statues, and intricately decorated palaces. Sargon I's reign also saw the defeat of powerful coalitions, including the kingdom of Urartu in the north and rebellious cities in the Levant. Sennacherib and the siege of Jerusalem. Sargon II's son, Sennacherib, moved the capital to Nineveh, which he transformed into one of the most magnificent cities of the ancient world. His reign is particularly famous for his siege of Jerusalem, recorded in both Assyrian inscriptions and the Hebrew Bible. Although Sennacherib did not capture the city, he devastated the surrounding region and collected massive tribute from the kingdom of Judah. His brutal campaigns became legendary, reinforcing the fearsome reputation of Assyria. Nineveh, the jewel of Assyria under Sennacherib and his successors, Nineveh became a cultural and political hub. Its walls stretched nearly 7 miles, enclosing opulent palaces, gardens, and temples. Sennacherib's palace reliefs, carved in stone, vividly depict scenes of war, hunting, and ceremonial processions. Nineveh also became a center for technological innovation, with an advanced system of canals and aqueducts supplying water to the city. Some historians believe Sennacherib's terraced gardens may have inspired the later legend of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Esarhaddon and the conquest of Egypt. Sennacherib was assassinated by his own sons, and his successor, Esarhaddon, focused on rebuilding Assyrian dominance. His most remarkable achievement was the conquest of Egypt in 671 BCE. A feat that no Mesopotamian power had previously accomplished. Esarhaddon installed Assyrian governors in Egyptian cities and proclaimed himself the ruler of both the lands of the Tigris and the Nile. Ashurbanipal, the Scholar King, the last great Assyrian ruler. Ashurbanipal combined military might with a passion for learning. He defeated Elam, crushed rebellions in Egypt, and expanded Assyrian control across the Middle East. Ashurbanipal's most enduring legacy is his royal library at Nineveh, which contained over 30,000 clay tablets. These tablets preserve some of the most important texts of Mesopotamian literature, including the Epic of Gilgamesh. Thanks to this library, modern historians have been able to reconstruct much of ancient Mesopotamian history and mythology. The fall of the Neo-Assyrian Empire. Despite its strength, Assyria's empire was built on fear and conquest. Constant warfare and harsh treatment of subject peoples created widespread resentment. By the late 7th century BCE, internal revolts and external threats weakened the empire. A powerful coalition of Medes, Babylonians, and Scythians attacked Assyria. In 612 BCE, the coalition captured and destroyed Nineveh, marking the dramatic end of the Neo-Assyrian Empire. The legacy of Assyria, though its empire crumbled, Assyria's influence endured. Its military innovations were adopted by later empires. Its administrative systems, such as provincial governance, became models for future states. Its art, architecture, and literary contributions continued to shape the cultures of Babylon, Persia, and beyond. The rise of Neo-Babylon. With Assyria's fall, Babylon rose once again to prominence. Under the Chaldean dynasty, it would enter its second golden age, producing legendary rulers like Nebuchadnezzar II and monumental structures such as the Ishtar Gate. Part 8. The Neo-Babylonian Empire and the Splendor of Nebuchadnezzar II. With the fall of the Assyrian Empire in 612 BCE, power in Mesopotamia shifted southward to Babylon. A new dynasty, known as the Chaldeans, rose to power and established the Neo-Babylonian Empire. This era was one of revival, grandeur, and cultural flourishing, cementing Babylon's place as one of the most iconic cities of the ancient world. The Chaldeans and Nabopolassar. The Neo-Babylonian Empire was founded by Nabopolassar, a Chaldean leader who rose to power during the waning days of Assyria. Aligning with the Medes, Nabopolassar played a critical role in the destruction of Nineveh in 612 BCE, ending Assyrian dominance once and for all. Nabopolassar consolidated his rule over Babylon and southern Mesopotamia, rebuilding the city's defenses and setting the stage for its greatest period of prosperity. Nebuchadnezzar II, the Builder King. The most famous ruler of the Neo-Babylonian Empire was Nebuchadnezzar II, Nabopolassar's son. Nebuchadnezzar is remembered not only for his military conquests, but also for his ambitious building projects, which transformed Babylon into one of the most dazzling cities in the ancient world. Nebuchadnezzar's military conquests. Nebuchadnezzar was a formidable general. His campaigns extended Babylon's influence across the Near East. He conquered the kingdom of Judah in 597 BCE and again in 586 BCE, leading to the destruction of Jerusalem and the First Temple and the Babylonian exile of the Jewish people. He defeated the Egyptians at Carchemish in 605 BCE, securing Babylon's control over Syria and the Levant. He maintained a strong defensive stance against the rising power of the Medes and Persians to the east. These victories brought wealth and resources into Babylon, funding the monumental building projects for which Nebuchadnezzar is renowned. The splendor of Babylon. Under Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon was transformed into a city of breathtaking beauty and sophistication. Ancient historians like Herodotus described it as the most magnificent city in the world. Key features included 1. The Ishtar Gate, one of the city's most iconic structures. The Ishtar Gate was a massive entrance decorated with glazed blue bricks and reliefs of lions, bulls, and dragons symbolizing the gods Ishtar, Adad, and Marduk. The gate led to the processional way, a grand road used for religious festivals and royal processions. 2. The Etemenanke Ziggurat. Nebuchadnezzar rebuilt and expanded Babylon's great ziggurat, known as Edamananki, or the House of the Foundation of Heaven and Earth. This towering structure is believed to have inspired the later biblical story of the Tower of Babel. 3. The Hanging Gardens. According to ancient accounts, Nebuchadnezzar built the legendary Hanging Gardens of Babylon, a series of terrace gardens, filled with lush greenery and exotic plants, watered by an ingenious irrigation system. Although their existence is debated among historians, the gardens remain one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Religion and Marduk's ascendancy, Nebuchadnezzar placed particular emphasis on the worship of Marduk, the chief god of Babylon. The Isagila temple complex, dedicated to Marduk, was expanded and adorned with gold and precious stones. Religious festivals, such as the Akitu festival, celebrated the divine authority of both the god and the king. Babylonian priests continued their tradition of astronomy and astrology, carefully observing celestial movements and recording omens. These studies contributed to advances in mathematics and timekeeping, including the division of the hour into 60 minutes. Daily life in Neo-Babylonian Babylon was a thriving urban center with a population of 200,000 to 250,000 people, an enormous number for the time. The city's economy was fueled by agriculture, trade, and craftsmanship. Merchants traded goods such as textiles, spices, and precious metals. Artisans produced fine pottery, jewelry, and carved reliefs. Scribes kept detailed records of transactions, legal contracts, and astronomical data on clay tablets. Social classes ranged from wealthy nobles and priests to common laborers and slaves, but even lower-class Babylonians could engage in trade or own property. The fall of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Despite Nebuchadnezzar's achievements, the Neo-Babylonian Empire was short-lived. His successors lacked his vision and strength, and internal power struggles weakened the state. The rise of the Persian Empire under Cyrus the Great sealed Babylon's fate. In 539 BCE, Cyrus conquered Babylon without significant bloodshed, cleverly presenting himself as a liberator who respected Babylonian religion and culture. The Cyrus cylinder, one of the most famous artifacts from this period, is the Cyrus cylinder, a clay document issued by Cyrus after his conquest. It proclaims his intention to restore temples, return displaced peoples to their homelands, and govern justly. Many scholars consider it an early example of a declaration of human rights. The end of an era, the fall of Babylon in 539 BCE, marked the end of native Mesopotamian rule. For nearly 3,000 years, Sumerian and Akkadian-speaking peoples had shaped the history, culture, and intellectual achievements of the region. Under Persian rule, Babylon remained an important cultural center, but the age of independent Mesopotamian kingdoms had come to a close. The legacy of Neo-Babylon, the Neo-Babylonian period, left an indelible mark on history. Its architectural wonders, especially the Ishtar Gate, have become symbols of ancient Mesopotamian grandeur. Nebuchadnezzar's conquest of Jerusalem profoundly influenced Jewish history, leading to the Babylonian captivity and shaping biblical texts. Babylonian mathematics, astronomy, and law continued to influence later civilizations, from the Greeks to the Romans. Part the ninth, Mesopotamia under Persian rule. With the conquest of Babylon in 539 BCE, Mesopotamia entered a new era under the Achaemenid Persian Empire. This period marked the end of independent Mesopotamian kingdoms, but not the end of their cultural influence. Instead, the Persians absorbed and preserved many aspects of Mesopotamian administration, religion, and science, ensuring that the legacy of Sumer, Akkad, Assyria, and Babylon continued to shape the ancient world. Cyrus the Great, in his policy of tolerance, the Persian king Cyrus II, known as Cyrus the Great, became a legendary figure in Mesopotamian history for his relatively peaceful conquest of Babylon. Rather than plundering the city, Cyrus respected Babylonian traditions and gods. According to the Cyrus cylinder, He proclaimed himself chosen by Marduk, the chief god of Babylon, to restore order and peace. He allowed displaced peoples, including the Jews, to return to their homelands and rebuild their temples. This policy of tolerance not only won him the loyalty of Babylon's priesthood, but also secured his reputation as a benevolent ruler. Administration of Mesopotamia under the Achaemenids. The Achaemenid Empire was vast, stretching from Greece to India, and required a highly organized system of governance. Mesopotamia was divided into satrapies, or provinces, each governed by a satrap who reported directly to the Persian king. Babylon retained its status as a major administrative and economic center. The Persians valued the city for its wealth, strategic location, and skilled bureaucracy. Mesopotamian scribes continued to use cuneiform writing to record transactions, taxes, and decrees, while Aramaic became the official language of the empire. Darius I and monumental projects, Cyrus's successor, Darius I, further integrated Mesopotamia into the Persian imperial system. He invested in infrastructure, building roads, canals, and palaces across the empire. Darius also established a standardized system of weights and measures, making trade easier and more efficient. Babylon became one of the key royal cities of the Achaemenid kings. Temples like the Assyrians were maintained, and festivals such as the Akichu continued to be celebrated with Persian support. Darius is also known for commissioning the Behistun inscription, carved high into a cliff in modern-day Iran. This trilingual text was crucial for modern scholars in deciphering cuneiform, much like the Rosetta Stone for Egyptian hieroglyphs. Economy and trade in the Persian period. The Persian Empire created a network of trade routes that connected Mesopotamia to distant regions such as India, Central Asia, and the Mediterranean. Babylon became a hub for goods like textiles and fine wool, grain and dates from Mesopotamian farmlands, exotic goods like lapis lazuli, ivory, and spices from distant lands. The Persians introduced a monetary system using gold and silver coins, known as darics, which complemented the traditional use of silver and barley as currency in Mesopotamia. Religion and cultural continuity. The Persians, followers of Zoroastrianism, did not attempt to suppress Mesopotamian religious practices. Instead, they respected local deities and even participated in certain Babylonian rituals. Marduk's temple and the priesthood retained their prominence. Babylonian scholars continued to excel in astronomy and mathematics, maintaining detailed records of celestial phenomena. These observations laid the groundwork for future Greek and Hellenistic astronomy, influencing thinkers like Hipparchus and Ptolemy centuries later. Xerxes and rebellion in Babylon. Not all of the Persian rulers maintained good relations with Babylon. Xerxes I, known for his campaigns against Greece, faced rebellions in Babylon early in his reign. The Babylonians, long proud of their independence, resented Persian dominance. In response, Xerxes crushed the uprisings and reportedly removed the statue of Marduk from the Assyrian temple, an act that deeply offended the Babylonian priesthood. Some historians believe this marked the beginning of Babylon's decline as a religious and cultural powerhouse. The decline of Babylon under Persian rule. While Babylon remained important throughout the Achaemenid period, its political autonomy and influence waned. The rise of other Persian capitals like Persepolis and Susa shifted the center of imperial power away from Mesopotamia. By the late Persian period, many traditional Mesopotamian practices such as cuneiform writing were slowly being replaced by Aramaic and other scripts. However, the knowledge preserved in Babylonian libraries and temples continued to be valued. The coming of Alexander the Great, the Achaemenid Empire lasted for more than 2 centuries. But by the 4th century BCE, it was weakened by internal strife and external threats. In 331 BCE, the Macedonian king Alexander the Great defeated the Persians at the Battle of Gaugamela, and marched into Babylon. Alexander treated Babylon with great respect, restoring temples and consulting the city's scholars. He intended to make Babylon one of his imperial capitals, but his untimely death in 323 BC prevented these plans from fully materializing. The end of Mesopotamian independence under Alexander's successors, the Seleucid Empire ruled Mesopotamia, blending Greek and Mesopotamian cultures. Greek became the language of administration, but Babylonian traditions persisted in religious rituals and scholarship for centuries. By the 1st century CE, however, the last cuneiform tablets were written, and Mesopotamian civilization as an independent cultural entity had effectively ended. Yet its legacy endured, influencing Greek science, Roman law, and Abrahamic religions. The Persian legacy in Mesopotamia, Persian rule preserved and transmitted Mesopotamian culture while also introducing new elements, such as the concept of a vast multi-ethnic empire, which influenced later states like Rome, monetary and administrative systems that streamlined trade and governance, a model of cultural tolerance that allowed local traditions to survive under imperial rule. Part 10. The enduring legacy of Mesopotamia after millennia of rises and falls. Conquests and rebuildings, the ancient lands of Mesopotamia have left a legacy that deeply shaped human civilization. Though the independent city-states and empires of Sumer, Akkad, Assyria, and Babylon eventually faded, their innovations and cultural achievements continue to resonate even today. The birthplace of writing. One of Mesopotamia's most revolutionary contributions was the invention of writing. The cuneiform script, developed by the Sumerians around 3200 BCE, was the world's first system of written communication. Initially created to record economic transactions, it rapidly evolved to encompass law, literature, astronomy, and history. Writing enabled the codification of laws, such as the Code of Hammurabi, establishing some of the earliest examples of justice systems, the preservation of epic literature like the Epic of Gilgamesh, the oldest surviving work of narrative fiction, administrative control over vast empires through bureaucratic record-keeping. Cuneiform's legacy influenced other writing systems and became a foundation for human literacy and record-keeping. Advances in law and governance. Mesopotamian rulers pioneered legal systems to govern increasingly complex societies. Hammurabi's code introduced principles of fairness, accountability, and proportional justice that still echo in modern legal thought. The idea that rulers could enforce standardized laws across diverse populations was a crucial step toward organized governance. These early legal codes also highlight concepts such as property rights, contracts, and family law that remain central in modern societies. Scientific and mathematical innovations. Mesopotamian scholars laid the groundwork for many scientific fields. Their sexagesimal number system remains the basis for measuring time and angles. Astronomy flourished with detailed observations of planetary movements, eclipses, and star charts, influencing later Greek and Islamic astronomers. Medicine and pharmacology advanced through empirical treatments recorded on tablets. This scientific tradition highlights humanity's earliest efforts to understand and quantify the natural world. Urban civilization and architecture. Mesopotamia was the cradle of urban life. Cities like Ur, Uruk, Babylon, and Nineveh showcased innovations in urban planning, streets, residential quarters, and public spaces designed for communal living. Architectural achievements. The construction of ziggurats, palaces, and temples with sophisticated engineering and artistry. Infrastructure. Canals, irrigation systems, and city walls that supported large populations. These urban developments set models for city building throughout history. Religion, mythology, and culture. Mesopotamian mythology and religion deeply influenced later cultures and religions. Their pantheon of gods, creation myths, and epic tales provided rich narratives that shaped Jewish, Christian, and Islamic traditions. For example, the Epic of Gilgamesh explores themes of mortality and heroism found in later Western literature. The biblical flood story has parallels with Mesopotamian flood myths such as the Epic of Atrahasis. Concepts of divine kingship and temple worship informed subsequent religious practices. Mesopotamian influence on later civilizations. The achievements of Mesopotamia formed the bedrock upon which many subsequent civilizations built. The Babylonians and Assyrians influenced the Persian Empire's administrative and military practices. Greek philosophers and mathematicians borrowed from Mesopotamian astronomy and mathematics. Roman law and urban planning owed debts to Mesopotamian precedents. Even modern concepts of government, law, and science trace roots back to this ancient cradle of civilization. Rediscovery and modern scholarship. Mesopotamia's secrets were buried beneath layers of earth for millennia, until modern archaeology in the 19th and 20th centuries brought them back to light. Excavations at sites like Ur, Nineveh, and Babylon uncovered monumental architecture, thousands of cuneiform tablets, and artifacts that transformed our understanding of early human history. Scholars continue to study Mesopotamian texts, deciphering languages and interpreting ancient knowledge, revealing insights into humanity's distant past. The eternal legacy of Mesopotamia. Though empires rose and fell, the spirit of Mesopotamia lives on through its contributions to language, law, science, art, and culture. It was here that humans first wrote down their stories, codified their rules, and built cities that became the template for modern civilization. The lost secrets of Mesopotamia are not just relics of the past. They are the foundations upon which our present and future stand. Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe for more videos, sweet dream.